Hi, let's talk about the week one assignment. It consists of a single video with two parts. Part A, you must explain your case study strategic context. This includes its mission and vision. Remember, mission is why does the company exist today, for whom, and to what extent. You should also explain what you understand the culture and values to be, and if and when there are any projects that are designed to move the company significantly into the future, these are going to be called critical success factors, and you want to identify them as well. You should also discuss your customer and competitors, and this would be a result of your SWOT analysis. And besides we're doing public relations, we're also going to do a PESTLE analysis because we don't exist just in the marketing function. Finally, tell us who your stakeholders are and explain why they are a stakeholder. Okay, in Part B, you're describing two items. The first is your monitoring system, and then the second is finding good data points from that monitoring. We'll discuss those in a minute, but first let's talk about monitoring. Why do we monitor our environment? Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of several change models, because really what we're doing is we're looking for things that are going to change the organization that need to be communicated. So I'm going to hold on for just a moment, and I'm going to bring up some slides for you to take a look at. Now, if you watch the Zoom video, you probably already saw this particular slide. And so what you should know about this slide is that the big blue ball is us in public relations. When you look at that, though, you can see that there's a lot of crossover with marketing. So let's take a look at what is just public relations. Corporate identity, branding, then media relations, crisis communication, and charitable donations. As you're monitoring, those are all things that you should be taking a look at. You know, should there be a change to charitable donations? Should there, is there a crisis that's looming? And we'll talk about that from a perspective of change in a minute. Finally, what can we be looking at that lends credibility to our corporate identity and to our branding? Now, let's take a deeper look. I want you to look. My mouse isn't working, so if you take a look over close to where the blue ball ends, you'll see inbound marketing, and you'll see there that website design and copy and social media are part of the public relations function. Also, you're going to see where influencer marketing exists, and we've got content marketing. So these are going to be items that we want to use the monitoring system to help us with. In particular, the outcomes that we're looking for are going to be anything that could be a threat, and that's going to be as a result of change of some sort. We want to look for content that we can curate and share, because that's going to help us build our corporate identity and our branding. It's also going to give us content for social media, which is where we do the corporate identity building and branding. And then finally, for all inbound marketing, we've got content marketing ideas that we have available to us if we've done a good job curating. Now, again, as we're going through the monitoring system, we also want to be looking for anything that is a threat. I'll talk about that next from the change standpoint. And then finally, we're looking for ideas that we can get from the monitoring system. All right, so that gives you the overall plan. Let's take a look and discuss why change is so important. Well, change is important because it occurs both at a personal level and it occurs at an organizational level. What I'm sharing with you right here is called the Bridges change model, and in particular, this is an overlay of the grief model. So when somebody goes through grief, they deal with shock, denial, anger, frustration, and ambivalence. In other words, when something ends, when something goes away or changes, individuals go through all these emotions. Now, sometimes we go through them very fast. There's been instances where I've gone from shock to ambivalence in a matter of hours. There's other times when I've gone through in days or months. Think about this pandemic. Think how this has changed people, and there are people that are probably still stuck down the bottom in what we call the neutral zone, where they're ambivalent, where they're skeptical, and that's not good. We need to be aware of that as business leaders. And then ultimately, as we start to come up the other side, we move through skepticism into, okay, this is going to be the way things are. I'm hoping it's going to get even better. I'm trusting the people that I'm working with. And now I begin to see a new future, and I start to get some enthusiasm. And that's when we have new beginnings. Again, from a standpoint of public relations and crises, these are what individuals go through. Now, who are the individuals that I'm talking about? Well, your stakeholders are maybe groups, but those groups are made up of individuals. Inside your organization, you have employees that are individuals. So even though your employees are a group, they're comprised of individuals, and the individuals are going to go through all these issues. Now let's take a look at what happens at the organizational level. This is called the Burke-Litwin change model. Things happen outside the company, and they can affect the mission, leadership, or the organizational culture of the company. And when they do, these are transformational issues. These can change the entire nature of the company. These factors will then also affect the way that the company does business. It can affect its structure, its management practices, its systems and procedures, and these are called transactional factors. Ultimately, these roll up into what we would call the work climate, and when we begin to change the work climate, now we start to affect people again on the individual basis by changing tasks and skills. Their level of motivation may change. They may have different needs and values, and ultimately it affects performance. It's when the work unit climate becomes affected and we move into the individual and personal factors that we then begin considering what we just talked about with regard to the individual reaction to change. All right, so those are really what happens internally, but let's take a look at what the drivers of external change are. And we have a couple of factors that we should be looking at. And these are really related to the scale of change. So we start with people and our social and cultural values, our motivational values. And in this instance, we could be looking at our customers and how they're affected and what's affecting them. Another factor that needs to be considered is technology, information and communication technology. And this deals with how the company is going to handle its efficiency and how it interacts with the entire world. A quick story here. I remember I was working for Walt Disney back in 1998, and the company delivered its first performance results where under Michael Eisner's leadership, the company had shown no growth. There was very, very marginal growth, but it wasn't the big leaps and bounds that the company had experienced before. And Wall Street all of a sudden started complaining about Michael Eisner that he wasn't leveraging technology properly. He wasn't utilizing something that was called enterprise planning software or enterprise resource planning software, an ERP, in order to manage the company not as individual segments, which is the way that it was being managed at that point in time. And other theme parks had its own operations. The movie studio had its own. ABC TV had its own, and so forth and so forth. Well, Wall Street put pressure on Eisner to change and to bring in a different piece of technology where he'd be able to manage the company as one. And the technology that was brought in was SAP. And as a result, just to give you an example, where Michael Eisner it would take him almost 6 to 8 weeks before he knew how the previous month's performance was. When he implemented SAP, he was able to know within 3 weeks how the company performed the previous month. The efficiency was greatly enhanced. But it was a major change. It was a major change not only inside the company, but it affected many of Disney's publics, particularly those that were in the supply chain lines of the company. So the people that we did business with in order to do our business were also greatly affected. Globalization is another factor. How do we have to operate in the world today? And that can have some huge impact and change. And then the last one really kind of goes back to the beginning, where we were dealing with people and social and cultural change, and now we have cultural from a worldview. And this can affect major change. As a matter of fact, you're seeing a lot of fallout, both positive and negative, from some of the worldview cultural change that many companies are going through today. One of the things that you should do some research on is both the woke culture and also the cancel culture, and how it's affecting businesses and how it's affecting their marketing. So I would urge you to do some research. Those would be the keywords that I would use, and take a look at how that is impacting your case study company and really all business across all landscapes today. All right, so we've got that. Let's go on. Now, technology is interesting because technology is actually driven by Moore's Law. And Moore's Law says that processing power will double every 2 years, while the cost for the increased power will be reduced by 50%. So what I'm showing you here is the number of transistors that sit on a chip, an integrated circuit chip. If we go back to 1970, now you can't see it on this chart because of the scale and the almost the logarithmic growth that we see. But back in 1970, there were about 1,000 transistors sitting on the integrated circuit. By the time we get to 2010, we're at, 1 trillion, 400 billion. And that's just 210. Now, what's interesting, it was about 2010 that people started saying Moore's Law is dead and we won't have the type of innovation that we've had before. Well, and the reason they were saying that is because what is a transistor? A transistor is a switch. It's either open or it's closed. If it's closed, it makes the electricity go a different way in the circuit. If it's open, this gate opens, then electricity goes a different way. Remember, computing is all about 1 and 0. 1 and 0. Closed and open. That is how your computer works. Now, as they were putting more and more transistors on the circuit, this gate, because they were getting smaller and smaller, was getting thinner and thinner. And they were concerned that there was going to be leakage. In other words, electricity would break through the gate because of how thin it was. It wouldn't be able to hold and direct electricity. We now have quantum circuits. And what that means is that the circuit, the transistor, can be open and closed simultaneously. Now, years ago, I was an electrical engineering major, and I was well on my way to being able to build integrated circuits. I can only tell you that telling me that something is both open and closed simultaneously blows my mind. But what it's allowed to happen is Moore's Law has continued to grow for over 40, 50 plus years, and nobody sees the end to this ratio in the near future. What does that mean? Technology is always going to be a driver of change. Okay, so those were the slides I wanted to share with you. Now, what I want to do, presentation that I want to share with you, and this, it actually runs a little bit longer than what I would like. It's 6 minutes and 41 seconds. They lost some points because of the time factor, but all in all, this was a very good presentation. So they share the business model as part of the strategic context. They discuss what the strategic elements are. So there you see the mission statement and the vision statement. Now, they didn't get the critical success factors right because, again, these are projects that the company is engaged in that are using money that could be allocated for other items, but they are allocating money to these projects because they feel it's going to achieve the mission statement. Now, I might come back if this were my deck and say, well, what they're doing is training the staff, and that's a critical success factor. So there might be a way to make these work as far as critical success factors go. Then they talk about who the customers are, who the competitors are. This just gives a good landscape. Then they do a SWOT analysis and a PESTLE analysis. Now, you've done a dozen SWOT analysis. The way to think about a SWOT analysis is this. I'm first going to do my own company. What are my strengths and weaknesses from a marketing standpoint? Then I want to go to my competitors, and I want to ask, what are my competitors' strengths and weaknesses from a marketing standpoint? I then aggregate my competitors' strengths, and they then become threats to my business. I then aggregate my competitors' weaknesses, and they become opportunities for my business. So that is how you properly do a marketing SWOT analysis. Now, we do the PESTLE analysis, again, because this gets into those global drivers of change, that last slide that I showed you. And this helps inform us into all those factors, as you can see: political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental. All right, let's move on a little bit further. And then stakeholders. Remember, if you tell me that your company has one stakeholder, it's the owner of the company, that's wrong. Just so we're there. There should be numerous stakeholders, and you should be able to explain who they are. All right, then we get into monitoring the brand. And this person chose to use Feedly, and then they also did customized searches with Google Alerts. Now, Feedly, you can search for different feeds in Feedly. Remember, Feedly's a reader. It's an RSS reader. And you can use keywords to find things that you're looking for inside Feedly. Let me take a look here. And I just want to, I don't think I have Feedly up, so I'm not going to give you any sort of demo with regard to Feedly. I don't like to do specific demos because you've got a number of choices that you can use. It's about how you create folders and how you have stuff being put into those folders with some level of automation, so that you're not having to do a long tail keyword search every single day in order to monitor your brand. So this person used Feedly and Google Alerts. They gave me a demo. And what they didn't do is they didn't use any sort of monitoring tool for social media. Now, again, Hootsuite is the granddaddy, but you could use tools like Social Mention, Sprout Social, and there's lots of others out there that you can use. I would do a long tail search for social media monitoring tools and take a look at a number of the different platforms that pop up and choose the one that you think is going to work best for you. You could also end up using TweetDeck for monitoring Twitter, which is a fabulous tool, and I've used it almost since the day that it came out. So there you go there. And I think that was it in terms of all this. And then here, the two takeaways, they actually came up with ideas for event creation. If you're going to give me ideas for event creation, also tell me where it came from. Who'd you see doing something similar in your monitoring system that you took their idea and used it? I think probably the most the easiest takeaways that you can get from your monitoring system are going to be items that you can curate and then share with your own twist to it in your social media channels. I think that's probably going to be the easiest, but you never know. You may end up looking at something that one of your competitors is doing and say, wow, we could take that and run with that with a little bit of modification and make it our own. And you never know if you're going to see a threat. I'll tell you right now, one big threat that's affecting everybody is, what if an executive order is signed by the President of the United States that says that everybody must wear a mask both inside and outside? How is that going to affect your business? That could be a massive threat. So even though I think we're on the downside of COVID and the pandemic of COVID is still a threat that you should be taking a look at. But be specific and don't use my executive order for masks, because I just gave that to you. Come up with one on your own. All right, I hope this video has helped. I hope you've got a lot more insight in how to go about putting all this together for week one. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to give me a shout. This is Dr. John. Have a great week.